You know, I've never actually talked to you about how you became a musician, and like everyone has a different origin story. And I'm super curious about, because I know you grew up not with a musical family, right? So like how in the world do you end up being, of all things, a professional violist?
No, that's really good memory. My family is extremely musical, but I think all of them saw how difficult it was for me to become a full-time musician.
Hmm.
And so it was like, oh, that's not fun. So they're very talented. Everyone plays something: banjo, fiddle, mandolin,
Oh, okay.
guitar, piano. But 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 seeing the whole professional orchestra audition circuit, I think a lot of them were like, okay, let's just do this for fun.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Just
um
probably a smart choice.
yeah, but I grew up on a farm in Kentucky, which was an amazing way to grow up, and here I am in San Francisco now. So
So what happened in between? In the interim. So like, you're in a farm in Kentucky, and like how were you exposed to orchestral music? Or did you start with the violin, or were
no,
you a
it's a great
violist from the
question.
get-go?
Actually, so I did start on Suzuki violin when I was 11,
Hmm.
and then driving tractors and combines, no joke. No cap.
Wow.
I was listening to NPR, thank
Hmm.
God for NPR,
Hmm.
and out of Nashville. So I
Wow.
that's kind of how I got introduced to the classics, and including Mahler and Bach and all the good
Hmm.
ones. And I was like, wow, I really want to be a part of that. And I didn't know actually at the time that you could do this as a profession. And
Hmm.
so I was super lucky that the airwaves kind of exposed me to the rest of the world. So I
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
very lucky for that little window on my tractor cab as a kid in Kentucky.
That's so cool.
Hey, Sarah, I have a
Yes.
question for you.
Okay.
Were you not only a pianist, but a violist as well? Am I right about that?
Yeah, I was. No, I started viola after piano. So I think I started viola when I was 8, piano when I was like 4 or 5. So,
Oh my gosh.
but yeah, I didn't have time. Like, I never got to be very good at it. I was totally proficient, but choose piano or viola, and I wanted to be on swim team and cross country and do everything. So, yeah, I kind of played through college, and I was like, you know what? I'm really not good at this, so I'm gonna stop
I
doing
bet
it.
you were really good, by the way,
No,
because
mm-mm,
Sarah Hicks is the best at the things that she does. And
no,
I I wonder if everyone knows where you went to college. Is that embarrassing?
no, not at all. I don't talk about it a
Because
lot,
well,
but
the reason okay, the reason I bring that up is
hmm,
because my downstairs neighbor Marcel is a
hmm.
violist, and he went to college with you
Yes.
and many other people I could name that I
Hmm.
will not. And so I think it's actually really cool because music makes the world smaller. It connects us all, and it's a beautiful thing. So I would love to hear about your college experience if you don't mind
No,
going there.
sure. I'm getting interviewed. This is unusual for Backstage Festival. Let's go with it. I love this.
I
Um,
hate talking about myself.
I like you talking about you. Well, my college experience was I went to Harvard, and I went because I got in. You don't
I
say no to Harvard,
as one does, yes.
as one does. And I became a music major eventually, but when I was there in the 90s, there was no music performance major. So I was
Right.
taking theory history, and I became a composition major. But in the interim, I was, conducting the Harvard Active Orchestra and doing all these, like doing opera and musical theater and just whatever I can get my hands on. Totally extracurricular. So most of my life was extracurricular, right? It's like doing Gilbert and Sullivan on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and the orchestra on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturday was another orchestra. It was crazy. Um, but that was my experience of, I wrote a composition as my thesis. It was called the AIDS Oratorio, and it was based on prose and poetry written by people with HIV AIDS, which I like spent 2 years collecting stories and poems. And so that was a huge project. But yeah, it was really interesting to not be in a conservatory setting where there are other people doing other things. And for me, that was super important to, you know, have a non-musical education, also to be around people who weren't musicians, because
I love
that's
that.
like most of the world. And so if you're going to become a musician, I feel like I want to know what everyone else is interested in and what their
It's
experience
true.
is,
No, no, I
you
think the
know.
conservatory experience is necessary for some people, and I did. My third school was a conservatory, but
Hmm.
I think it's so important to study, have a cross section, cross pollination
Hmm.
of
Yeah,
disciplines.
yeah.
And good on you. The Harvard Radcliffe Orchestra is a storied ensemble. I mean, I know people who are doctors,
Hmm.
MDs, as well as professional musicians who were in that orchestra. So that's really cool. You got to work with them. Sarah
Yeah.
Carter, did you know her?
Of course, I know
I
Sarah Carter.
what a
She's now in
she's
Oregon, right?
yeah, she's an
Yeah.
amazing human being and seriously like one of the best cellists I've ever heard. But she chose to become a
Yeah.
doctor because
Hmm.
she could do anything. So
Ooh, you've
um,
frozen. Don't freeze, Matt. Come
oh,
back.
no.
Oh, there you are.
Hello.
Are you
Sorry.
unfrozen? Am I frozen? No, you're unfrozen. We're all good.
I've never seen the movie Frozen, but maybe it's time. Isn't there a
Just
song "Let It Go"? Just let it go.
you know, let it go. You're right. Da, da,
That
da.
would be a good theme for this dreadful year.
It would be a great theme for this. It's really a dreadful year, and I want to get to that. But I
No
just really
hurry
want
on
to
that
no
because
hurry
we're
on
all
that because
there.
no, it's going to last for a while. So in this series, I've been talking to like a lot of different people. I've done soloists, I've done jazz musicians, I work with like talked to China Forbes from Pink Martini, talked to an astronaut. But um, I'm trying to do a bunch of orchestral musicians because I think you guys have a very particular experience in terms of being a musician, being an artist, because I think being an orchestral musician is one of the hardest things you can do as a musician. Because in many senses, you take 80 people, right? Of very individual people. So it's like an organism with like 80 heads. And somehow that needs to all come together in some way, even if you don't all totally agree all the time, to create something that's bigger than those people. And it's
Absolutely.
interesting.
The, the what is the expression? I'm gonna butcher this, but the sum, the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. And I do feel that when we are playing a Mahler symphony or probably not a Mozart symphony, but um, a great piece of music, a Stravinsky piece.
Hmm.
It's sort of the school of fish, the way we move together,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't explain it. I really can't. And to sort of have that experience as a human being, uh, we're awkward. We are individuals. We have our own egos and weaknesses and strengths. But I think the school of fish phenomenon is really unexplainable in vernacular. So to me, that's magic, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
so lucky as a violist to get to participate in that. And my colleagues really
Mm-hmm.
are super special, and um, I actually love that. If you have strong leadership, it's the best feeling in the world to follow the leader.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's rare, but it does happen. So
It's that you have those moments. I mean, I think it's interesting because from a conductor's perspective, you some of those moments you have them not so often, but like everything is meshing together and everyone's sort of one mind, and it is like a school of fish where you're just moving in total sort of this great harmony. And that doesn't always happen. I think you experience just as many points where you're like, holy shit, everyone's like slightly awry, and like you have to sort of collect them back together. So
totally, yeah. And I can't
would you
explain it.
say which of those are more common? I mean, are you always a school of happy fish, or are you sometimes a scattering school of fish being chased by a shark? That's a terrible metaphor, but whatever,
No, I
run
love
with
it
it.
because I'm a huge Pixar fan, which is also from the Bay Area,
Yeah.
and so that makes me think of Finding Nemo. But I think I'm so lucky that I've only ever been in really good viola sections.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally they're only really good because I'm there, right?
Right.
But
Exactly.
but no, no, in all seriousness, I've been very lucky professionally that the viola sections I've been lucky to be a part of are uh, led by great musical minds,
Mm-hmm.
instrumental skills aside. I mean, because
Mm-hmm.
that's extra. But so yeah, I think it's more the norm for me
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in my experience, and I love. I can be a leader, but I much prefer to follow a competent leadership,
Hmm.
contribute. You know, not lead from the back or anything
Mm-hmm.
seditious like that, but to be part of that Greek chorus of an amazing viola sound is just like
Mm-hmm.
it's unlike anything else for me.
That's a really sort of great way of describing it. Also, because you guys are in the middle of the sound, like literally in terms of range and just what you do, the viola's function is really to create that inner harmony or that pulse within the string
Absolutely.
section.
So
So, like, what
we're the
does that feel like in particular? Because I think it's very different from being on like opposite ends, right?
yeah, the way MTT always describes it is we have the squeezy notes. I mean, he's a pianist,
Squeezy
so
notes.
he's much more soprano and bass because
Mm-hmm.
of the piano oeuvre, for lack of a less annoying word. Um, but I think the viola can provide the meat in the sandwich or the dark chocolate in the
Mm-hmm.
flavor. It's the umami. It's the
Is
umami.
that, that's
And
good. I
I'm not
love
even kidding.
that.
Like, because I'm a foodie, I'm an okay cook, not an amazing cook, but the viola gets to color the sound with the major or the minor or the dissonant note or the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
suspension. You know, if it weren't for those inner voices, second violin, viola especially, I think, and clarinet as well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, it would just be melody and harmony. And quite frankly, that's dumb. You have you already have that with like every Scarlatti sonata, which those are gems. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
dissing Scarlatti. I love Scarlatti
Mm-hmm.
keyboard pieces, but I think viola is really lucky that we get to sort of be the nudge in the middle who
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
instigates, and
Yeah.
I just I freaking love it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. What was I going to ask you? I had another auxiliary question about being in
Well,
the. Well, so this was my question. So violas, given all that umami greatness, are often, the butt of jokes orchestrally. Like, where does this come from? For those of you who are
so
watching who are not
sure,
musicians.
sure, sure, sure.
Okay, let's
So,
explain this.
just to give an example to the viewers, if there are any, that I think historically the viola is the butt of jokes. So, for instance, what's the difference between a violin and viola, Sarah?
I don't know, Matt.
If you light them both on fire, the viola burns longer. Bigger piece of wood. Here's. Are we allowed to go PG-13 on here?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
You can
So
go R or X as far as I'm concerned.
what's
Go
the
ahead.
difference between a sex worker and a violist?
I don't know.
I the viola only knows one position. Um, what's the definition? What's the definition of perfect pitch?
Mm.
Throwing the viola into the rubbish bin without hitting the rim. I've got so many
I
more,
no, I'm sure you do. But but
let's
why?
just
Why? Are you
yes, yes, yes.
all, are violists inherently sort of make funnable? That's not a word. That's not a
No, no,
literary.
no. We are accessible for the group, the herd necessity to have a whipping person,
Mm-hmm.
but I think actually there is a historical context. So from the 17th century on,
Mm-hmm.
violists generally were violinists who had reached the late autumn of their careers and were
Mm-hmm.
relegated to the alto or tenor roles in the string choir.
Oh.
So now we're
Oh.
I actually argue now with Curtis and other amazing schools teaching violists at the very highest level, especially the Cleveland Institute of Music, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
biased. Um, I think it's harder to get a viola job in a symphony because we only have about
Really?
10 violists in each orchestra, and you have about 40 violinists. And the conservatories do not reflect that as far as enrollment numbers. So,
Huh.
having been on many audition committees as a committee member, not an auditionee,
Mm-hmm,
um, then I think it's absolutely demonstrable that it's easier to
huh.
get a violin job than a viola job. And I would love it if I can start a huge controversy with that statement. But uh,
But I think it's from a numeric and sort of statistical standpoint, that makes a lot of sense, right? It's like you're 3 times or 4 times as likely to get a
absolutely. And
violinist job. So why are there so many violas coming out of conservatories now?
I
Is
think
it disproportional?
it's a sort of false narrative that has evolved. And oh gosh, I don't want to use the F word, but there was a youth orchestra mom who
Mm-hmm.
shall remain very anonymous for the sake of the story.
Okay.
And they were told, your kid is equally talented on violin and viola.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you want to do here? And the mom said, French the viola, and we'll stick with violin. But I think those stigmas do still exist, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's false. I think it's much harder to do well on the viola than the violin.
Mm-hmm.
I really do, because physiologically, you'll know this. You'll be able to back me up on this. It's
Yes.
just ergonomically, it's an awkward instrument, but as
Yes.
far as the sound, the tonal qualities, like it's just like nothing else. Every instrument likes to compare itself to the human voice, but I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely advocate that the viola is close to the human
Mm.
voice.
Now that's a slightly controversial comment. I think a lot of cellists would disagree with
Cello,
you.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Cello, I
Yeah.
think, and look, we all have cello envy. Let's see. Can you see the cello here? There's a cello here. Can you see that?
Or is it? Yes, I can. I have
Okay,
cello
so
envy now. Yeah.
cello is, and I'm trying to learn how to play cello, but it's not going very well because
Yeah. Yeah.
can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Oh, I don't know
Um,
about that.
but don't worry. I'm not going to become the next cellist. But yeah, viola. I don't know. There's something really special about us as humans too. I think because we're a middle voice, we are good listeners. We are sort of the
Mm-hmm.
middle children of the string section,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's a double-edged sword because we
That's
can be
true. Yeah.
brats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but but I think musically we are very tuned in. Whereas if you were the bass or the melody always, you
Mm-hmm.
might not listen in
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
way.
Yeah, I totally agree because you become biased sort of top or, wherever you are to hear those sonorities.
Yeah.
But when you're in
Whereas
the
viola,
middle,
there's no
yeah.
room for ego with what I do. It's like you are always bridging the gap between the top and the bottom, and I love that. I don't know.
Until you get to Bruckner 4 and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, I'm the melody.
Like, thank God it's in first position.
Because that's the only position you know.
I mean, not to like rag on my own profession, but
Mm-hmm.
there's some truth in exactly what you just said. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Interesting. But you also, okay, I want to sort of take it away from the orchestral one for a sec, but you play chamber music as well. And this is something I ask all the musicians I talk to because there's something very different about playing solo rep or chamber rep or being in an orchestra, right? I mean, it's the repertoire is different, but do you approach it differently because it is a different size ensemble or is it?
So it's a great question, and I hope I let you finish the question, but if not, correct me. The
Mm-hmm,
my teacher in Cleveland, Bob Vernon, always
mm-hmm,
said that orchestral playing is the same. It's the exact same skill set as chamber
mm-hmm,
music. And I was so lucky in Cleveland to work with the Cavani String Quartet. And I was in a quartet that won the grand prize at Fishoff, but we were all at the same time
mm-hmm,
aware that the best quality of life for us
mm-hmm,
at that for these four players,
mm-hmm.
everyone's life path is different, and
Right, right.
I support that. But for us, we were already trying to win work in an orchestra. So even
Okay,
though
okay.
we were a super serious string quartet with amazing coaches and
Mm-hmm,
mentors, But I would say, I hope until I retire, that the skills I learned in that string quartet are the skills that I use in the orchestra.
Right.
And so in that sense, I suppose, yes, I love chamber music. It's like a marriage, without the sex, maybe. And they,
Sometimes there is, depending on,
well, in our quartet, it was just that
Okay, good.
musical marriage.
Mhm.
Hi Dale, hi Sarah, hi Steve. And, and they, it's this incredibly intense pressure cooker musically, but
Mhm.
it's almost too personal or too
Hmm.
exposing to my inner self to
Huh.
be full-time chamber music. So I really
Mhm. Mhm.
I love that we can hate conductors at the end of the day, Sarah. And, and not you, of course. You're our favorite.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
it's kind of nice in an orchestra to be able to pass the administrative stuff or the difficulties on the conductor at the end of the day. So
Mhm.
yeah. And
Which
by the
you
way,
Mhm.
for whoever's listening, Sarah Hicks is the freaking best. I've known you since what, 2004? Is that possible? Like, that's
2005. Yeah.
5. Okay,
Mhm.
okay. So 15 years, going
It's a
on
while.
16.
It's a while.
And I, like, whenever I see your name on the schedule for whatever we're doing, I'm just like, oh my God, that's going to be a good week because
Aw.
we're going to be okay. Because there is this
I'm gonna
sort
take
of,
care of you.
yes, exactly. And it's so true because we have this, the conductor orchestra relationship sometimes is not perfect. So
Mhm.
it's nice when we see your name up there, and I'm not alone. I mean, we all are like, oh, Sarah's great. So it really is a happy thing
Aw.
when we see that you've been booked. So I wish we could do it more often,
I
really.
know. Well, that's nice to hear.
It's,
Because that's interesting because I want to say that conductors don't often get feedback from orchestras, unless it's their own, right? And then they might get direct feedback. Otherwise, you hear stuff second or third hand, like, oh, were you
yeah,
at
yeah.
that orchestra? Oh my God, they just hated you, or, whatever it is. But that no one's going to come up to you and be like, we don't like working with you. Or, it's more
It's
likely that they'll come up
true.
and be like, oh,
Plus, there's
it's
the
nice working with you.
whole labor union thing. I mean, it's
Well,
just
that
like
too.
weird bifurcation of what a horrible word. There's this weird disconnect between um, what's actually happening and what's happening in the hearts and the souls and the minds of the musicians and the conductor. So,
Hmm.
yeah, just believe me when I say that we are so happy whenever we see you on the schedule, and we know that it's going to be an awesome week. So,
Oh,
thank you.
that's so nice to hear.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
great.
violists are nerds, so we don't lie.
Well, this makes me wonder. So, what happens if you have a conductor that does not make you feel safe? Like, what's the experience? No names, of course, but what's the experience of like, what do you do as an ensemble if you're like, we can't trust this conductor?
Do you really want to know? Because it
I
ain't
do really
pretty.
want to know.
So,
No,
okay,
no.
for instance, one like you said, and I appreciate you prefacing it with the no names thing. We had a conductor
Hmm.
in an orchestra which I was playing, and he or she um kind of went after the principal violist, who of course I was not. I've always been in the section. I've never taken
Uh-huh.
I don't take principal auditions. I love following good leadership.
Right, right.
And they said something to the principal violist, and the principal violist said, we can't, that's not enough information, we need something else.
Hmm.
So in the concert, that person turned to the violist, the principal violist,
Hmm.
and went at this specific juncture of this, I believe it was a Mozart symphony. No,
Uh-huh.
no, no, it was Brahms' Haydn Variations. I remember exactly where it was.
Oh boy.
And
Uh-huh.
they went like this to the principal violist. They're like with fake tears, and only the violists could see it, but it was like this sort of pissing contest. Sorry,
Holy
I'm like
shit.
making your show so like PG-13. Sorry,
No,
but
no, no, it's okay.
I kind of loved it because it was very real, but also sort of demonstrated what can go wrong when the breakdown happens. The
Mm-hmm.
breakdown in communication, mutual respect,
Right,
common
right.
goals, kind of what you see in American politics today. Not to get
Imagine that. Lack of respect, common
It's a
goals.
thing. It's a thing. Yeah.
It is a thing. Well, I mean, I guess you're kind of fighting the worst of human nature to find the best of human nature, right? So that's sort of the what musicians do and what ensembles of musicians do. Because I mean, not just the conductor. So what do you do when you find yourself? I guess it's more in chamber music, but in orchestral music as well. Like you're playing next to or with someone where you're like, I don't agree with you musically at all, but you still have to make it work. How do you make it work as a musician?
That's actually such a great question. And I'll go back to what I said before about chamber music that you, well, actually, no, let me amend that. I will go back to what I said about at the end of the day, it's great not being only a chamber musician, but being able to sort of pass the baton to the leadership.
Mm-hmm.
The person on the podium, the Sarah Hicks, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, and just say, look, this is, I'm doing my best, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm one widget in a huge machine,
Mm-hmm.
and there is some comfort in that.
Mm.
I think we all are playing our asses off
Mm-hmm.
in an orchestra like the San Francisco Symphony or the Minnesota Orchestra, both of which
Yes.
I've been honored to be a part of. And but I think I, yeah, perfection is very rare. And when you see people ugly crying in the audience,
Mm-hmm.
that's a rare thing, but it's irreplaceable and almost unfathomable. It's this sort of, I hate this word, but synergy that
Mm-hmm.
is achievable through wordless communication through sound
Mm-hmm.
waves. And
Yeah.
I still can't believe how lucky I am to be a part of that. To to play the end of Mahler 2, there's a lot before you get to the
Mm-hmm.
end, but
Mm-hmm.
you look out in the audience and you're just like, wow, I was part of that, and
Yeah.
I truly am grateful for that. Even when we're not allowed, maybe even more so, when we're
Mm-hmm.
not allowed to be on stage together, it really is a big deal to me.
So I think we can talk about that now because, saying that this synergistic relationship with the audience and the energy you get from them. So we're in the situation now where I just came back from Minnesota. I was hosting their broadcast and they're broadcasting live 6 concerts from now on, which is great.
On
However,
TBT, right?
on TPT,
Yeah,
and NPR and on the website and YouTube. So check it out.
I
However,
will.
there's no audience, right? So we don't have that exchange because that's the understood exchange, right? You as the audience sit there, but it's your energy, right? That reflects what we're doing. And it's the amalgam of that makes that moment special. So what we're
I
trying to do is recreate that without an audience, which is hugely challenging. And I don't think non-musicians understand that we need people to be there, right? Does that make sense?
I
That's part
agree.
of that's part
It's
of
a
the agreement of live music.
it's a two-way street. It's this sort of social musical contract that you have to have the two-way street. And I think that's what's been so difficult about this year. We
Mm-hmm.
have also in the San Francisco Symphony been doing a lot of online content, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's incredibly challenging because of physical distancing regulations and
Mm-hmm.
also just the lack of that two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something about feeling that, I don't want to say love because that's a cheesy word, even though I'm cheesy. But it's a sort of give and take between the audience and the performer that
Mm-hmm.
we miss desperately. And
Yeah.
it's not just a financial thing, of course.
Mm-mm-mm.
It's a it's an artistic thing, and music is, of all the arts, I think, very special because it's happening in real time. It will never happen exactly the same way twice,
Mm-hmm.
and we are able to sort of project our own human experiences onto the composer's little black dots. You know Gary Larson, The Far Side. He's
Yes.
like,
Hmm.
geez, look at all the little black dots.
Yeah.
You know? But there's this great meaning behind those black dots, and almost unspeakable emotions that can happen, like Das Lied, or even a really well played Mozart symphony, which
Hmm.
I don't really experience that, but I know it because I've heard it,
Right.
and I think so. Yeah, we're starving for that. So I hope the TPT. I'm gonna check it out because I just hung out with Greg
Oh
Miller
yeah. Hmm.
last week, and he was excited that that was happening, and I I'm glad to see the innovation happening this year because
Hmm. Hmm.
we are sort of kept apart by necessity, of course.
Yes. Uh-huh.
I get all of that, and I support, not overwhelming the hospitals with cases
Hmm.
of COVID, and that all makes sense. But it's incredibly difficult when you're not able to join together in the groups
Hmm.
of thousands. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but it's been a really challenging year. So I've learned audio software, video
Hmm.
software, and I'm
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
terrible at it.
But I think all of us have had to like work on other skills to be able to do what we do in a different way, right? And that's what a lot of arts organizations are struggling with. And I think what a lot of non-musicians don't understand is like it is fun to play music for yourself. There is some satisfaction in that, but
Sure.
that's not why we do it. The deeper satisfaction is in sharing those dots on a page, bringing them to life, mirroring them in our own emotions or lives, and like sending it out into the world so everyone else can be a part of that. And that connection is what it's the power that lies behind what we do. But that's
Absolutely. Yeah.
inherently part of what we do. It's not just we're playing an instrument. Like that's not necessarily making music. It
I
necessarily is, as
I
you
would
said,
agree.
this exchange. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure the composers would agree. It's about how their dots on the page affect other people in and without words.
Hmm.
It's a really special thing, and I miss it greatly because
Yeah.
the most I've done, I think last week I recorded a Mozart duo with a colleague and no audience, and then I did a
Hmm.
Mexican traditional folk music, which was a super cool project, but once
Hmm.
again, no
No
audience.
audience.
So it's something that I think we all can't wait to get back to. So I'm glad that Minnesota and you have been doing some stuff that will at least connect virtually with audiences.
Right,
That's
right.
um,
And that's live, so I still feel like there is a sense of sharing that moment even if we're not together, because then, as you said, I mean, we make music and like unless it's being recorded, even then like that moment is gone, it dissipates, right? So it's
absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
either you're there with it or it's done. But there's something wonderful in that, right? That you can't re-experience that particular moment.
it will never happen again in
Hmm.
exactly the same way, and I think that's either magic or misery. But thankfully, with the orchestras I've gotten so lucky to play with, it's usually magic.
Yeah, yeah. So like what's your favorite rep to play? What's the stuff that resonates with you the most where you finish a concert like, holy shit,
So I'm
that's it.
spoiled. I'm really spoiled with the Minnesota Orchestra. We got to record the entire Beethoven cycle, and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
that was a that was an exceptionally tight ensemble at the time. This was back in 2005 through
mm-hmm,
2009, maybe.
mm-hmm.
And then in San Francisco, we play Mahler. We have been playing Mahler a lot with Michael Tilson
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, who's
Right.
just really figured that out as far as
Mm-hmm.
how he wants to, reorchestrate or tweak things to make it really
Right.
jump jump off the page in Technicolor. So it's
Mm.
completely different type of orchestral playing. But I feel so lucky to get to play these Mahler symphonies. And we were gonna do Mahler 8, the Symphony of a Thousand, this
Uh-huh.
year, and unfortunately
Mm.
the year got canceled. But
Mm-hmm.
I really, other than Mahler 8, I've played Das Lied, I've played all of the songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have to say I have to go with Mahler. Like
Mahler.
Mahler 9, if I had to go to a desert island, I think
Mm.
that might be the piece I take with me.
Yeah.
Really great Mozart piano concerti as well. I think are
Mm. That's interesting.
irreplaceable.
That feels like sort of not polar opposites, but on a very different end of the spectrum. So what are those two connected somehow, or are they just for completely separate things, separate reasons?
Totally separate things.
Okay.
So the second theme, usually in a woodwind instrument,
Mm-hmm.
bleh, they the second theme of Mozart concerti first movement is
Mm-hmm.
they're almost always sublime, and
Huh.
you have to kind of you know what I'm talking about. You're a pianist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Primarily, so you know what I'm talking about. But the second theme, for some reason, Mozart would save his special material for those second themes and the first movements of his piano concerti, and more than his symphonies even. And I think it's just you can't BS that stuff. That's
Mm-hmm.
the real that comes from the heart. And
Yeah.
the Mahler symphonies, I would say, not just for sheer sonic power.
Mm-hmm.
Say that 6 times in a row.
Sure sonic
Um,
power. Sure. Okay.
oh, you could do it. Okay, sorry. Um, but there is this sort of, Mahler sort of takes a journey through the Alps for about 90 minutes, and then
Mm-hmm.
at the end, he just leaves you broken and devastated on the floor and like experiencing the full gamut of human emotion. And I'm not kidding. I've looked out in the audience at the end of Mahler 9, Mahler 2, Mahler 6, and you
Mm-hmm.
see people like sobbing in the seats, and that's
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
they don't people don't generally do that at a movie. Sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the movie, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't do that at an art gallery. You don't do that
Mm-hmm.
at a singer's recital generally.
Right.
Uh, so I would say Mozart and Mahler, but it's like pick your favorite child,
Mozart
right?
and
It's like
Mahler.
I don't. It's hard to sort
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
really answer that question, but if I had to, and I have to apparently, then
Mm-hmm.
those are my answers.
For now, Mozart and Mahler.
I'll
But no,
change.
I
You
want to.
ask me tomorrow, it'll be somebody else.
It'll be
So
something.
yeah.
Well, no, I think that's fair because it's not that there's no permanence or preference, right? It changes as we change, and that's kind of important that that happens. But it's
Yeah, my
interesting that you
teacher.
bring up that. Go ahead.
No, just my teacher would always say that whatever piece you're working on should be your favorite piece. But I
Mm,
I would actually have to amend that and say no. There are some things that transcend what you're working on, because sometimes what you're
hmm
working on is a necessity.
hmm
So
So I guess the flip side of that is I'm always curious with musicians. Like you play pieces that you adore, very easy to enter into that world. Something that from a composer that doesn't resonate with you, or a piece that you're indifferent to, but still we have this responsibility to create that moment of, magic, for lack of a better word, regardless of how we feel about something. So for me, that's an interesting challenge that I don't think a lot of people think about from outside the industry. That there is stuff that we don't like, but we're going to perform the heck out of it, right? So
it's
like,
true.
what's that mental process?
It's pretty academic at that point, but I do have a lot of friends that I try to bring into Davies Symphony Hall in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco. Ding, ding, ding.
Mm-hmm.
And frequently they will say, "Oh, I did not like that first modern piece," and
Mm-hmm.
I try not to say, "Well, neither did I," because you know what? The Mozarts of our generation haven't been, all found yet. So we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to sort of not just trying, we are actively
Mm-hmm.
pursuing what is an open mind, and what is an open
Mm-hmm.
door, and what is inclusivity, and what is diversity, and how to sort of achieve. Ugh, it's such a buzzword. I'll avoid it entirely, in fact. But how to achieve an equal playing field for composers of all different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So I I think that's super important, to play the bad pieces and the good pieces, and
Mm-hmm.
let history decide what that is. And
Mm-hmm.
I once again, not naming any names, but a very well-known contemporary composer. We were playing a piece in San Francisco, and I thought,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'll never play this piece again.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what, Sarah? I looked in the part about 2 pages later, and I saw my own handwriting. I had already
Oh
played it.
God.
I had played it like 7 years before, and
Wow.
I was like, oh dear God, what does this mean about me, intellectually and physically and emotionally and spiritually and all of the above? So
Well,
that
maybe
was
that you play so much music that it's hard to keep track of it, but
that's also true. I
you
think San
know,
Francisco is the hardest working orchestra. We play over 200 concerts a year, which is almost unfathomable. But
that's
um,
extraordinary.
yeah, but
Yeah.
my point being that it's true. Some days you're not playing your favorite piece, but
Mm-hmm.
that's what if you look up professionalism in the dictionary, that's what I aspire to be, even though I'm not every
Mm-hmm.
day. You've seen me be unprofessional. I know it. Um, so
Maybe occasionally.
thank you. Thank you. We are still friends, and I hear what you're asking, but it's hard to answer because different people handle it different ways. And you look at an orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
you may have 104 people on stage if it's a full orchestration, and
Mm-hmm.
each 104 of those individuals have their own ego and strengths and weaknesses and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what they're
Yeah.
bringing to the table. So
It's
I'm
complicated.
I'm just for some reason remembering, didn't we have some Thanksgiving dinners together in Minneapolis back in the day?
I think we did
I
back
think
in the day.
so.
I can't remember where, but we have. It's
No, I remember.
it,
Yeah, yeah, it was fun. Good time.
it was
That's
good
when
time. And
I
this is like what I've really been enjoying about what I've been enjoying about the pandemic, which, there's silver linings everywhere. And one of them is that I've been reconnecting to my musician friends, having them on live and being like, hey, let's just talk about like music stuff that doesn't get talked about in this way openly and let other people listen. But, like just being able to see you and have a chat that's more than like 2 minutes long because we were both working, like passing each other in the hall at
exactly.
Davies.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that for me has been just a fun experience to be able to really talk to people and be like, how do you really feel about this? And it's important, I think, and that creates our own connections. And those are the kinds of
Absolutely.
things
Yeah.
to, that's the building block of civilization are these connections that we make with each other. And that part of what music does is that it creates those connections. Um, and that's why I think we do what we do, right?
I agree. I mean, no matter how those connections are formed, I think at the end of the day, the concert hall would be meaningless if it weren't for that human connection. But I
Mm-hmm.
also know that we've had Thanksgiving dinners together back in the day when you were principal pops conductor of the Minnesota Orchestra, and you did some subscription weeks, and uh, I think you have a connection to a horn player, if I'm not mistaken. So there's just music makes the world more connected. I don't want to
It
say make
does.
the world smaller because it's a wonderful big world,
It is
but
a wonderful big world.
it, it,
Yes,
it, it definitely makes the world more connected. And
it
I'm really
does.
grateful for that at my old age, after having
Oh,
been in the
stop.
industry for 16 years. I really, especially during this year, am so
Mm-hmm.
appreciative of the human connections more than ever. So
Yeah.
thank you for being one of those, because I'm just like, I can't wait to get back to it full time. And in the meantime, like you said, it's so cool to be able to sort of ruminate over
Mm-hmm.
these minutia of what we love about
Mm-hmm.
our jobs. And they are
Yeah.
jobs, but they are also a way of life more than a job, I think.
Mm-hmm. It is a way of life. And I also think like the ideas that we talk about they're actually not minutia. They're sort of like big ideas about what it means to be an artist and how you do be an artist and why we are artists. It's not just because it's fun to play an instrument. It really is this sense of, we want to communicate, connect, be part of something bigger than we are. And those are really big ideas, I think. And if I,
That's a
I
good
always,
point.
yeah. You know, if people like took that as an example, I mean, we always say the orchestra is sort of a microcosm of society where, you know, individuals very different, do different things, sometimes don't get along, but, you know, under the right guidance, like do really amazing things, right? Like something amazing gets created out of that. But
Yeah, I
to go
mean,
back to the
without
beginning of the
getting
conversation, it takes all the, you know, individual people.
absolutely, and that's a word I use too much, absolutely, but incredibly, you are correct, Sarah. And I, you know, without harping on the individuality of the musicians too much, because that
Mm-hmm.
can get touchy, I do think that we, once again, the sum of the parts are much, the whole
Well,
is much greater than the sum of
the
the
sum of
parts.
its
And
parts, yeah.
um, to be able to sort of set aside differences at a performance and be able to come together and I, you know, and create something is just, it's a special thing. It's an honor. It's also a responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
I think that's what helps. If 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 you've had a horrible day or your kitchen flooded, let's say, hypothetical,
mm-hmm,
and you have to go on stage and play Mahler 2, you're gonna set that aside because the music
mm-hmm.
demands it. It's not about you anymore. And
Yes.
egos do come into play, but usually only in rehearsals. And the concert is when it's go time. This is it's definitely getting down into the nitty gritty because I I think I have a dream job. I really love my colleagues, and um, yes, there are differences artistically, but that's what rehearsal's for. And as a
Yeah, yeah.
conductor, I assume you're kind of tasked with, I don't want to use the word herding because that's livestock, but directing. You're tasked
Mm-hmm,
with directing to get all of these unique individuals into the
mm-hmm,
same sort of direction.
mm-hmm.
And that's a huge responsibility. Whereas as a section viola player, thank goodness Jonathan Vinicor, our principal, is
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, and I've known him for 22 years, 22 years.
Wow.
So I have the utmost respect for him and his preparedness and professionalism. So
Yeah.
it's really great to be able to just be like, well, if you have a question, look up, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the answer is there, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky in that sense to be able to follow the leader in a,
Mm-hmm.
that's a childish statement, but
No,
it's very,
no,
yeah.
that's important. So before I let you go, because IG is going to kick us off soon, one question from a viewer: chicken pig.
I love the name.
That was the question to you, chicken pig. I don't know what this means. Does this mean anything to you?
Wait, I don't see a question. Can you read it to
Oh
me?
no, I got one from before. It just said chicken pig.
I
Do we
don't
know
know
what
what that
that
means.
means? Okay, all
I do
right.
not know what that means. Well, I grew up on a farm, and
Uh-huh.
my personal Instagram handle
Mm-hmm.
is Ornery Piglet,
Mm-hmm.
but that actually is an NPR reference that we don't have time to go into. But the chicken pig.
I'm gonna look for the
Oh my
message.
gosh, maybe it's Sam Bergman. Is it Sam Bergman?
Uh-huh.
Because so we have Cat Pig. So Sam and I would write in the music
Mm-hmm.
of the Minnesota Orchestra these
Mm-hmm.
cartoon characters, which were Cat Pig, and Cat Pig
Oh, maybe
generally,
it was cat pig. It wasn't chicken pig.
it
You're right. It
must
was
have,
cat pig.
it has to have been Cat Pig,
Mm-hmm.
um, because Sam and I would write Cat Pig cartoons in all the parts, and it generally meant that we disapproved of something, but it was never as Sam or Matt. We
Mm-hmm.
would just, Cat Pig doesn't approve of much. We'll just put it that way.
Ah.
So Cat Pig doesn't suffer imbeciles.
So it's like a secret way of notating something, and
Sort
essentially.
of, but
Yeah,
it was like
yeah.
a really cute piglet with whiskers
With
and
whiskers.
only snarky commentary, nothing nice
Mm-hmm.
to say about anything. And it was sort of our way of, I think, getting through the more difficult repertoire or rehearsals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Sam, if I'm like outing you.
No, I think he's the one who asked the question. But no, I think it's to end on that sort of interesting note that like there is you have these relationships with people in the orchestra, you find ways to sort of relieve the stress. There's a commonality
Totally.
to sort of, working through rep that you don't like or, conductor that you don't like working
And
for.
it's totally puerile, immature. Sometimes, like the conductor will say, "Let's start at rehearsal R," and the entire orchestra goes,
It goes,
"Arr,
arr.
arr." Or without revealing too much, let's see. In the Minnesota Orchestra, I
Mm,
remember if someone would drop a brass mute or a shoulder rest from a string
mm,
instrument, the entire orchestra would
mm,
lift up their bow and instruments sky
mm-hmm.
high,
Yeah,
and to prove that it wasn't
it
they
wasn't them.
who had dropped
Yeah.
it. And if it was a guest conductor or soloist, it would leave them shooketh. I will put it that way.
It probably would because they were confused. But I love that every orchestra has its own spirit and its own way of relating to each other, and that musicians have a sense of humor, and that they're people, and they
Totally.
do stupid
Yeah.
shit sometimes. They do sublime things sometimes, but like that's just all part and parcel of being a musician and doing what we do is because in the end we're just humans,
It's
right?
it's essentially a human experience. I no,
Yeah,
I totally agree with you, Sarah. And God, I can't wait to get back on stage with you. I mean,
yeah.
really, yeah, good things to look forward to without dwelling on the misery in between.
Yes, yes. That's I think that's a good place to end. We have things to look forward to past whatever this is. We're gonna get there eventually.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank goodness.
We'll make music again. This was awesome, Matt. Thanks
You
for
too.
chatting.
I
It's
miss
been
you, and
fun seeing you,
you
and
too.
I miss you. Yeah. So sigh. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay, everyone. Thanks for viewing. This is on IGTV later. It'll be up on YouTube. Not that any of you need to see it on YouTube because you've been watching this, but if you want to see the whole thing, it'll be on YouTube next week. And I think Judy Kang from last week is up now.
Nice.
And thanks, Matt. I'm going to
Thank
see
you,
you in person
Sarah.
sometime. And
Yes, I
yes,
can't
it's going
wait.
to be awesome.
Yeah, every like I said, every time we see your name up there, we're like, yes, it's gonna be a good week. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye, Matt.
Bye.
Bye.